the larger problem that we're trying to respond to, since COVID, about 80% of students in higher ed across the whole country have been negatively impacted, mental health wise, emotionally, psychologically, socially, by isolation of COVID. Even before COVID happened, Gen Z was the loneliest generation for the first time that we've been recording research on loneliness. So that was prior. It had always been the elder generation. So there's been a shift. But the good news is that the opportunity is huge, right? People, the need is increased. People are looking for opportunities to stay connected and to get connected. And what we know is that this kind of relational investment in their life is the number one predictor of happiness or well-being across the lifespan. So this is an investment not just in the college years, right? This is opportunities to learn how to be parts of healthy communities that will serve them in every context they go into after this, professionally, personally, across their lifespan. And research notes that in adulthood, it's actually our friendships that become the most critical relationships that we form. So friendships specifically in adulthood become increasingly important. And just, I mean, maybe this is obvious, but we're working with our natures when we talk about connection and belonging. Every single person is wired for this, hardwired for this, soft wired for this. This is the most basic human need that we have. So you're doing extraordinarily important work, and we're really grateful for everything you're investing. And then the key question then becomes for us is how, right? How do we create these groups and spaces that naturally foster meaningful friendships and community and a sense of belonging in the Trojan family, but more broadly from our perspective in the human family? Right? How does everyone feel a sense that they belong here exactly as they are? So we have two very simple conversation goals for tonight. One, to be with each other, build relationships with each other. And then to share our ideas and our questions and needs around these issues. Okay, just like a forward-thinking, imaginative exercise can really help people open up. It's open-ended, right? It gets people sharing parts of their life. We learn things about each other's families right then. And things that look backwards on our life as well. So something like, what was your favorite game or toy growing up? Invites people to start to share parts of what it was like for them growing up or what was meaningful to them in their past. And then something like rooted in the present that's helping people connect with things that they bring to the world and to relationships. So something like, what is your actual superpower? A lot of times I get students when I ask them, what are you looking for in a friendship? And what do you feel like you bring to a friendship? Sometimes people say, I don't know that I bring anything. So we were trying to find ways to connect people to the truth that we all have something to bring, even if it's just our own presence and we can't name individual traits. But helping people think about, no, we all have superpowers actually that we bring as well, things that we've learned to be and do over the course of our lives. So those, you can find those in the PowerPoint that we'll attach later. For vision, what are you hoping for your students, and what would you see and hear that showed you they felt connected? And where do you feel like you are right now as a community? And you can answer all of those or none of those or one of those or two of those.
I think when it comes to, the vision of like a different, like a religious space or just a space in general, it's like, I think the biggest thing is a space for people to meet other people that have similar backgrounds and similar interests and values. And I think that with religion, like a lot of times that comes pretty easily. And I think that, we joke around like in the Jewish community, like Jewish geography, which is basically just, being able to play the name game about with if you had a friend from camp or whatever it may have been. And it's a lot easier of once if play the name game and you have success matching similar people, you can, I feel like you learn about someone based off of kind of which of your friends do they already know, and who are those close friends, as well as I think kind of making, I always like to use the word like catalyst. And I think it's just kind of like, it's the starting point. And I think it's the starting point to more involvement with that organization. Or, you know, I think that I think a lot about between kind of Chabad and Hillel, of that there are different things that are offered, and that it's encouraged and hope that both people are involved with both, and you don't have to pick one or the other, because they offer very different things to, you know, a lot of similar and a lot of different things to their communities. And it's just a matter of like finding what it is that you're passionate about. But there's like the hope is to be able to do both and do everything, and it's just kind of a matter of how much time someone has during the week. Like I know for me personally, that's something that I wish I was able to do more of, is to go to more Chabad events, or, you know, go to like, it just the timer sometimes, that whatever it is. But I think it's just kind of identifying that and figuring out, you know, what about the community and what about it that you're interested in, and finding people's interests and being able to kind of work with people to get them to those programs that they are interested in, and not just give them everything, but to be able to kind of specialize that in the vision to have those specific things. That was kind of a couple different points to hit on, but anyone else wants to share, kind of start talking about their.
I can share next.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Something that I definitely hope for is trust. We were talking about this a little bit with the, like, you don't just go up to ask someone and ask, you know, what's your medical history? But I think something that shows that people feel connected is that they feel comfortable asking questions and answering questions that are a little deeper. And getting to that point where you can ask someone, honestly, what's been hard about this last month for you, and get a real answer, and be able to talk about that, and talk about, like, how are we dealing with this? And how are we dealing with this together? Not just separately in our own lives, but how can we help each other? I think that's a large part of my vision for friendship.
Thanks, Carolyn.
I can share a little bit. Yeah, in terms of our hope for students for Chabad at USC, it's really that students feel comfortable to come to us for anything and everything. One of the challenges that I know we face as an organization is just with the face of the organization being a rabbi and rabbi's wife, a lot of people see them on campus or see us on campus and assume, oh, I have to be of that religious level to kind of join the organization. And of course, that's not our goal, and that's not what we're about, but that definitely is a perception that we have to work against when having people join us. So I think one of the challenges that we really have when we meet new students is showing the diversity of thought and diversity of experience that we have among our community. I think we do pull students from various backgrounds to come in the end to our events, and we hope that they feel comfortable coming to all different types of events. Like, for example, one of our main things that we do are our Shabbat dinners on Friday nights, and that's everyone comes to whatever their background, because everyone loves a good meal, and you can come with your friend group and your ideas and join and meet other people. And the issue that we really face is kind of turning that into a larger community of all these people who come with different interests to Shabbat. How can we cater our learning events or our social events that make all of these disparate groups comfortable joining us and want to come for everything? Because the students who really get the most out of our community are the ones who kind of dive in. I mean, I joined freshman year, my second day, went to Chabad and met my best friends who I'm still a second semester senior year the closest with at school. And our hope is that we can develop those friendships for other students. Right now, it's been tough just because so many of our events really revolved around being in person. The digital is completely new for us. There are some organizations that did some things online. We really didn't. It was really all about kind of being there. And one of the benefits that we provided was that our Chabad rabbi lives on campus and is there for you to do something anytime you need it, whether it's to hang a mezuzah or drop off chicken soup late at night, etc. And it's been tough trying to pivot that community, which really is based on this in-person attendance and this in-person community, and move it online. But it's been Zoom school for a while, so we've been trying.
Thank you, Ben. Swami or Jeffrey, do you feel like sharing? And you can always pass as well.
Yeah, I could share a bit. Yeah, I guess along the theme of how being online is pretty different, and a big part of building community is I feel like in like the spontaneous conversations, just, you know, before or even after the event. Um, and a lot of that doesn't translate to being online. Um, and so one thing we're thinking about is kind of like over communicating or giving intentional context for people to just kind of talk. Um, and I mean, Zoom and I guess the delay and the unmuting and everything kind of acts as like obstacles. So it does help to have like those kinds of icebreaker questions. Um, and I guess use them quote unquote strategically to build community, in terms of asking about people's interests or backgrounds and getting to know each other. Um, so yeah, I think creating context like that are important.
Thank you.
I think, you know, the core of what I think, like, I guess kind of walk through maybe a specific student's experience. And I guess it's like kind of, I would say, like, I think I'm gonna kind of use myself as an example, and then how I guess my journey through Hillel. So I started freshman year, you know, went to Fresh Fest. That's where Ben and I actually met. I was on the bus on the way to Fresh Fest. We sat together, funny enough. And look at us both now. Former president of the two big Jewish organizations. But pretty funny how that all works out. And I think, you know, from Fresh Fest, just getting to meet some of the FEFs, or the first year engagement fellows, which it's the big coveted position within our Hillel community, about being a sophomore, junior, senior that will come back, maybe move in early, and get to meet all the freshmen and transfer students that are coming to USC, and just getting to meet them and answer any questions and kind of help calm the nerves going into starting at a new, you know, in college, etc. And I think that being a fresh fester and getting to hear those questions and getting to meet people that were ahead of me, I think really put stuff into perspective of just kind of what was available. And I think that first semester I wasn't as involved as I think I had envisioned initially, but my second semester I joined, there was a first year students of Hillel Fish Committee. Ben, you were on also, right? Or am I crazy?
I
You
was
weren't
not. I came to your events, but I was not on
Okay,
your
just
committee.
yeah, no. But so I can remember who was there was the fish committee happened first semester as well, but I only joined second semester. But so with that, I think it was a space that, you know, planning events and kind of seeing what my friends would be interested in going to, and like why they would be interested in starting to go to Hillel as freshmen and transfer students. And then that kind of progressed into being an FEF my sophomore year, as well as a campus engagement intern, which both those were a lot about just kind of getting coffee with people. And really, I feel like it was like a learning stage and just learning what the community wanted and what were things that were missing, what were going well, what wasn't going well. And you know, I think the idea of constant growth, and that there's never, you know, I think, you know, not directly there, I'm going to refer to a book in a second, but I think that there's the saying about Disneyland that, you know, the imagination won't leave Disneyland until it's complete. And it's like always building and always growing. And I think with any organization on campus, I think that the second that someone stops growing and stops building off of what they've been learning about and working on and improving, and if it's the new social media platform, if it's the new generation from, you know, millennial to zillennial to Gen Z, you know, and how the style of the students, etc., like everything has to continuously evolve and continuously grow, and keep, you know, building off of the previous quote unquote generations, and different years of people throughout Hillel and throughout the different organizations in general on campus. So I think that, you know, for that, it was also a lot of learning. And then I had the chance going into my junior year, be one of the Fresh Fest co-chairs, as well as one of our presidents. And both of those was kind of after that learning stage, kind of acting on it and to bring in those ideas and the thoughts, and just kind of help to lay the groundwork for it to kind of build off of what the previous groundwork was and lay kind of the new layer. And my hope is to have a new layer above me and to keep going. And, you know, myself and Goldie, who was my co last year. And with that, I think it's, you know, identifying what it is that the community wants and kind of meeting the community where they are, and not trying to bring them, you know, I guess bring the community to where you are, but I guess, like, you know, if that makes sense, to kind of go to where they are and go to their interests. And I think that, when it comes to throughout up to, and then now kind of working with seniors and stuff, but I think, through those different stages, a big piece of those interactions and those growth was, I think I mentioned it earlier about me, figuring out people's interests and getting coffee and just learning from everyone. And so knowing which of my friends and who I was working with and talking with from the different Fresh Fests I went to, and what their interests were, and then reaching out about those specific things. And so if I knew someone was a big Jewish food person, we would bond over like matzo ball soup, or we would talk about coming to Shabbat dinner, or we had like a every other Wednesday night barbecue event, and to kind of pitch those events versus there's some mindfulness events, or different, like, and so depending on who someone is, and I think not trying to pitch every event to every person, I think that just doesn't necessarily work, but to pitch the events to things that people would actually be interested in is kind of a piece of it. And I think that, at the core of the strategies and tactics, I think it's really just presenting what people really want and presenting what would get people excited. And I think that if that is a speaker, or just having a space that people can go between classes and having a space that allows that growth is really awesome. And I know that a lot of what I just said is really specific to like in person, and I think a lot of all of my kind of experience at that growth side of it was in person. And I think that on Zoom, that has been a challenge for everyone, but especially I feel like a religious organization and religious organizations on campus, where the initial, I guess, like bonding factor for someone isn't, oh, we're interested in Troy Camp, or being, interested in climbing, so we're being in the climbing club, or interested in, working with whatever, photography, so then they're in the photography club, and the interest and is that religious connection. And I think that it brings people together, but it also, there's so much about the community building and so much about just what the community can offer to people. And I think that something also that I found very interesting is a lot of people found their kind of people and their communities within Hillel specifically, as well as the other spaces, and they didn't need that like catalyst or that hub anymore when it came to Zoom, and they had their friends, so that they would do their own Shabbat dinners, and they would do they didn't need Zoom to see their friends. They would find other spaces to do that. And so we had a program called Shabbat in the Box, and that was effectively if we didn't have host of Shabbat at Hillel, we would offer a challah and grape juice and candles, and then a gift card to Trader Joe's to help make your own Shabbat dinner. And so I think we've put a lot of resources into that this year to, again, find people where they are, and because they're all hanging out, to provide a resource so that they can offer Shabbat dinner to their friends. And that just for example of kind of building that. And so the core, I guess, is, also identifying there's a lot of growth that is still ahead. And, my hope is that growth on the online sphere can stop at one point, because we're back in person, and that, can take everything that we learned from these online spaces, and that it can just bring back like in-person school and these spaces in such a energy and excitement for everyone to want to come to everything, that it is hard to, that I joke around that my goal for Shabbat dinners last year was to have to turn away people because we were too full. That was like my dream, to, be to that point that we, or not necessarily turn away people, but, I think that being able to either figure out a way to just like really maneuver the space in such a way, or figure out how to make sure everyone's covered, but to be at a point that we have to figure those things out on the fly. And I'm going to stop talking in just a second to hear from everyone else, but I think it has nothing to do with, I guess, Hillel as well, but one of my quarantine reads was this book that I just sent the link in the chat for. It's a Disney book called Be Our Guest, and it's tools from the Disney Institute about just community building and like what makes this like the secret sauce of Disney community service, or not community, of customer
Hospitality.
I want to say community relations. That's not the right word. Of customer service. And I think that it was fun to kind of read it from a perspective of, this was after I had finished my term as president, and kind of read it and kind of looked back at what were some of the tools or ways that we could do things differently as Hillel. And like, there were certain things that we aligned with and certain things that we could do differently. And it's a pretty quick read, but definitely would recommend that for your religious organization, as well as just, it's a fun thing to kind of learn about for whatever space you'd be in down the road. Would love to.
Question for you, Brent.
Absolutely.
When we chatted before, you were saying that that Hillel has a practice of tracking the interests and affiliations of students in a very organized way. And maybe you could say a little bit about that because it's pretty interesting as a tactic for building community.
Yeah,
Yeah, good call, Jim.
I think that, you know, it's through just tracking, you know, I guess it's kind of check-ins, like when they come into the building, like when students come into the building or what events they come to, as well as kind of understanding. And I think it's through having your, you know, having each person, like each campus engagement intern or each student kind of have their network and they know their friends' interests. And it's kind of one of those spider web feelings where it's, you know, I may interact with 5 people and those 5 people have 5 people, and it just slowly kind of builds on those interests. And so I think that it's kind of having a central space to also see if, you know, you could look at the analytics and see, oh, this person only ever showed up to the barbecues and Shabbat dinner, or this person only really came to the mindfulness events, or, you know, by seeing just attendance, I think it was really helpful to extrapolate on that and to build that, as well as I think that knowing who to connect to. And I think that's just kind of being a leader in these spaces, is kind of knowing, oh, like I'm personally not a science-based major, I'm a public relations major. So if I have a friend that is interested in bio or is pre-med, like I can connect them and make that friendship, because I may not be the perfect person to welcome them into the community in terms of finding someone that has those more specific interests, but can, you know, can be that general welcome, but then to how to not like to broaden their personal Hillel circle and to have more people that they, familiar faces that they can reach out to. And I think that's kind of a big piece of it, is just to help make sure people find their like-minded people and go to the events that will find those people. I think is.
But you're actually keeping records and keeping track of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's to kind of understanding where, you know, I think understanding people's interests, as well as, you know, if we know that, like knowing what people really are interested in, or, you know, I guess that's again with the, when we reach out to certain people about events, knowing like what events to reach them out about, and having, so it's not just in someone's head, but to have it written down somewhere.
Got it. So you're not being scattershot about your invitations. Yeah.
Exactly. Happy to answer anything. I know I said a lot, so if anyone else has any other questions, happy to kind of clear up or clarify anything else as well.
Love to hear from Carolyn about
Yeah.
your tactics, your methods.
Yes. So when we were in person, a lot of our sort of methods for getting connected to people were centered around like going out to the club fair and showing up at like the religion, whatever the religion club fair is, I forget. But obviously that was going to be a little harder to do online. So we just decided to like fully commit to doing outreach online through social media. And it actually worked really well, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. It was very like, this is an experiment. We're going to see what happens. But basically we had our student leaders team, which is about 7 people. And we all went on Instagram and we were looking for USC students. And so we would just like follow them on Instagram. And if they followed us back, we sent them a message introducing ourselves, welcoming them to USC. It wasn't necessarily like a, hey, join our club, but it was like, welcome. I would love to get to know you. Also, I'm part of this club if you're interested. And we made a lot of connections that way, and it was really good. And some of those connections became people that have stuck around and actually like are part of InterVarsity now, and some of them aren't, and that's okay. But the main lesson that I got away from that was like, wow, people really are looking for connection. I wouldn't have necessarily thought that this would work last year, because if random strangers like messaged me on social media, I'd be like, that's kind of weird. I have friends. I'm not looking to meet strangers. But I think the fact that everyone was looking for friendship and everyone was just like, we don't know how to do this. We don't know how to make friends online, really opened people up to connecting with people who were strangers before but aren't anymore. And then from there, I think like Brandon was talking about, we have tried to do a good job of sort of keeping track of who comes to what and just how involved people are. and to be able to follow up with people individually. And I noticed you haven't been coming to stuff as much lately. Are you like, is your work schedule changing? Are you really stressed out? Like, how can we be here for you in a new semester or in a changing semester? So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. I remember when we talked to you last time, Carolyn, you were mentioning, like, can we maybe just talk for 1 minute or so about what adaptations you have made that are successful in the digital space, knowing that you can't actually be around a physical table together. What are a couple of the things that have been effective for you in the digital space?
So we've been using Zoom a lot, and normally we have like the weekly events that we have include like a large group space and then some smaller group spaces. And so in the large group space, something we've been doing is having, like, it's usually we have a guest speaker. And when this is in person, people can just hang around afterwards and talk to each other about their lives and whatever the guest speaker talked about. So we've been kind of mimicking that by putting people in breakout rooms at the end of the event. And having some discussion questions ready to go that are related to whatever the guest speaker is talking about. We'll ask them to bring with them some discussion questions for the group. And that's been really helpful because it kind of lets people go into this space with some things to talk about, so they're not just sitting there staring at each other like, what are we talking about? But it also, like, we don't close those rooms. We let people stay for as long as they want to. So you can move from those questions into talking about, more personal life stuff if you want to. That's been something that's been really good and something that I appreciate a lot. And I know that's true for other people too. And then also in the smaller group spaces, I lead a Bible study on Tuesday nights, and we've also been using the breakout rooms a lot. Even though it's a smaller group, we usually have about 8 people. When we have like a discussion question, we'll put people into like pairs or threes just to get even more down from talking in front of only 2 people feels a lot less intimidating than talking in front of 8. And I think that's been also really good for people just to be able to establish trust with an even smaller group and be able to share more personally.
Thanks, Carolyn. Any thoughts on that, Brandon, or anyone else that has had some success with digital adaptations?
I think a lot of use with Instagram, and just we had a random acts of kindness week last week where people could submit and like fill out a Google form and then add a picture just to like shout someone out and say some nice words. And I know it's one of those things where I think people don't get compliments enough and don't get kind of like that validation of like that they're putting in their hard work. And I think that just that people are you're seen by others, and that the littlest detail that you may not have realized like is something that people really, that meant so much. And I think that kind of tied in also with the in-person piece of showing up, like going up to someone like as a leader and saying hi when they come to an event, or messaging them on Zoom if they hop into something that's their first time, and just checking in how they're doing. And I think that having that ability, I think, is really awesome, and just making sure that people feel welcome. And I think with the online stuff, just kind of trying out different things, and the normal programs that were our week-to-week programs we had in person aren't what we do online. And I think kind of knowing that it's okay to have a completely different format, but it ultimately ends with the same goal. I see Ben's hands up, so I want to give him the floor.